Hi everyone, and welcome to Mountmaking Focus Studio tour for the virtual Mountmakers Forum. Thank you all for coming. I'm being assisted by Jack Mackey, former lead Mountmaker with Seattle Art Museum, and we're working with fans and things so that I can speak without my mask and give a little bit more clarity to this presentation. I've worked for 30 years in Mountmaking in shops of various sizes, up to 5,000 square feet at Seattle Art Museum, and was with the museums in New Mexico and Santa Fe for 7 years, and have spent a lot of time working with private collectors and museums all up and down the West Coast. This shop is a 500 square foot shop with flexible benches and kind of the minimum tooling that's needed to do the full range of work. And so I'd like to show you what you can do with just a well-chosen batch of equipment. So let's come this way, and I'm going to start with what I consider to be the essential tools of the Mountmaking shop. My first tool that I have to have is a good bandsaw. This is a Powermatic 143, which is a wonderful saw that has good capacity. This is a 14-inch saw, but it's got a gearbox drive that allows you to toggle back and forth between slow and high speeds, which gives the ability to cut steel. And by getting this saw, I've been able to expand my capabilities from doing mostly brass and plexiglass mounts to including steel in the entire work. And it's been a game changer. It's a wonderful old saw. So the next tool that I'd like to show you is the 1-inch belt and 8-inch disc sander that we use for truing surfaces, for joints, and for shaping. This is one of the most versatile sanders that I've ever gotten to work with, and I like it for so many reasons. There's a platen behind the belt part way up, and there's a soft portion of the belt here. You can even work up on the wheel a little bit. There's room behind the belt so that you can have your piece of work go behind and be able to work with it. We're not going to turn it on because it would make plenty of noise because it's connected to an integral dust collection vacuum. The disc sander has a really nice solid table. It comes with a miter gauge that I have since lost, sadly. I need to make one. But I have it set up with a 90-degree stop so that I can bring a piece of stock in and have a true 90. And this sander is now 25 or 30 years old, and it's still going. I think I've replaced the switch and a few bearings. The same basic sander comes in a smaller size of a 5-inch disc and a 1x30 belt. That one's a 1x42. And this is pretty good. It just doesn't have the capacity, and I don't find it has quite the usefulness that the larger one does, but it's much less expensive and still is a wonderful small machine. These sanders really are, along with the bandsaw and the vices, one of the things that I really can't go without in the Mountmaking shop. The heart of the shop is benches and vices for forming the metals, and this is on wheels so we can move it around in the shop, but this and the variety of hand tools is where I do the major forming and shaping to the templates that I've made. This is a great vise Versa vise, or this is specifically a gyro vise. It moves, and then as you tighten it, it cams and solidifies. And there's a current version that Shop Fox makes that they refer to as a parrot vise, and is really nice. From there I've got, this is a duo-mite bender, and this can do brass easily, but the capacity of it is, because you have leverage, able to work with steel as well. There I came out further and did a more gradual bend, but this was another bend that has been done on this. There, I want to show you the joining section, and that is coming to the fire table area. Since this is a teaching shop, we have multiple fire tables, and I have them set up with a fume collection system that comes over to a large centrifugal fan and a hose that gets thrown out the window. It's extremely effective, simple and cheap, and does the job. The heart of silver brazing is the torches, and this is a torch I've just become acquainted with. It's known as an easy torch or an orca torch. Swivels at the connection here, interchangeable nozzles on it, give it a full range of flame sizes. It works with propane or with MAP gas and has a lot of heat to it, and I find it to be one of the best torches I've ever used for mount making. It's a jeweler's torch, and I was introduced to it by one of my studio mates who runs a jewelry school. For larger work, I have a Miko Midget torch, and this is a propane and oxygen torch. You can also use it with acetylene and oxygen. Has extremely high heat value to the point where you can do silver brazing of steel and really do some major work with it. I've joined half-inch steel tube to 3/8 steel plate with it very successfully. It's a wonderful size in the hand, and but requires a real set of bottles and regulators. The third kind of torch that we've used for years is a very basic trigger start MAP gas torch, either directly connected to the bottle or with a hose between. And I've used this one and also the Sievert, which has interchangeable nozzles. And I've used these for years because I could travel with them and pick up a bottle of MAP gas wherever I went, and they just made doing work in remote locations, like the work I've done in Alaska, very easy. And with a pair of these torches, you can silver braze 1/4-inch steel, and very successfully. So I use soft fire brick for my surfaces. I like it because it's a cut surface fire brick, and it also does not hold the heat in the same way that harder fire brick does. And then from there up on my shelf I've got third hands for holding the work, pieces of small steel for blocking the work in, the flux that I need, and then here at hand I have my silver brazing alloys. I'm a great fan of Harris number 56, Safety Seal 56, which is a great industrial alloy and is the equivalent of a jeweler's easy solder. Safety Seal 45 would be the equivalent of medium, and I just find they really work beautifully. Now that we've moved beyond kind of the basic tools of the bandsaw and the sander and the fire table, I want to show you a tool that has expanded what I can do more than any other, and that's a vertical milling machine. This is a Clausing 8520 milling machine. It's a knee mill, which means the table moves up and down, as opposed to a drill mill, which the head moves up and down. And it's basically a really precise and really big drill press. It has movable table, both directions, solid vise, and a lot of rigidity. This takes number 2 Morse taper tooling, so I have a set of collets that go into the quill. I have drill chucks, have an entire range of tooling that I've gathered for it. So this allows me to make slots for adjustable mounts, to cut away sections, to be able to machine a recess and bring things together in a very smooth fashion. And the precision drilling is a massive part of it. And especially when making series of mounts, where I'm making a group of the same sort of mount, I can set this up for mass production. It has been an amazing tool. They are a scarce tool, this specific model, but there's a current version that is sold by Grizzly and some of the other manufacturers that are tooling that's made in China and Taiwan. There's an almost direct duplicate of this that is available. So it's probably my favorite tool in the shop, and I keep finding new uses for it. I traded a fiddle for this. As you've probably seen, there are a few musical instruments around, because that's the other thing that I do is musical instrument restoration, specifically banjos. And as much as I really enjoy it, this is actually one of the least used tools in the shop. The Myford lathe is a lovely small lathe, British made, but I use this very rarely, even though it's such a sweet tool. The other tool that came into my life more recently that is the other piece that I so love is a blast cabinet. And for years and years we would use pickle and files and sandpapers to prepare the mounts for the finishing. By being able to use a glass bead blaster, I've been able to cut the time that I spend on finishing by an enormous amount. Still use pickle when it's appropriate, but this goes and this will give a clean surface and will take all the excess flux off so easily. And I wish we had had this when we did some of the very large projects of Seattle Art Museum and the Burke Museum, because it just makes life so easy. The thing that's needed is a large compressor to go with it, and I'm really lucky in that this building is a shop building that includes a large compressor system as part of just the infrastructure that's here. The studio, being a teaching studio, has some things in it for people to work with. And so we've got an entire array of objects that we use for the class. Shards that help replicate archaeological collections, more historic, showing a good capture mount, basketry. Most of these are things from my own collection, but then some of these come in from Goodwill and are able to be taken with. I always like to have a good variety of things like that. Geologic forms. This is a good example of a seismic mount using brass and epoxy putty to give firm capture with a gentle hold. The epoxy putty is something we use, and here on this shell mount is purely an epoxy putty form. This is a 5-minute mount. Other natural history specimens, glasses. This is a fun mount of a piece of lace, and this is done in Foss shape, which is a polyester felt that when heated hardens. And so this is giving a very good support. And then everything else from a Civil War sword to hats. This is a great one because it has all this need for support out in the rim, and you get to see that lovely interior. So, one of the integral parts of doing this work is good benches, good places to work, and it's often an overlooked part of a shop. And so I'm lucky that these benches have been loaned to me by the violin maker that had this space before, but just a solid space. And in setting up a bench for working with objects, I like to put down a piece of Volara, and I like to outline it in blue tape so it just screams that this is the place for the object. Gives a nice, firm, clean, padded area, and it shows that the tool zone is outside of that. So this is where we do the clean work. We try to do the dirty work in the other sections of the shop. Try to keep it a little bit separated. In a shop this small, it's obviously an issue. It was such a joy to work at Seattle Art Museum for the original downtown museum, where we had a clean shop and a dirty shop that were actually two separate rooms. That by far is the best. So over here we have all the equipment for working with Plex. Strip bender, acrylic plastic, perspex, however you want to call it, heat gun. We have special gloves that are dedicated just for working with the plastics. And these are a TIG welding glove. They're a deer skin, and they're just a really nice, enough insulation. And then these are a few examples of mounts that were made by people in the classes. Plexiglass is a difficult material in that people think it goes away, but you get a lot of light, and so it's something to use carefully. It has its place. It's not for everything, but the certain areas that you use it just can be beautiful. This goes with one of the large glass bottles that's on the wall over there, and it just goes away. This is a book mount that was made by one of the students, actually a preparator from the Museum of the Bible. It is a development of lots of different methods that he kept kind of working with, but book mounts are obviously one of the great Plex mounts. So I want to thank you for coming along on this little tour of Mountmaking Focus Studio. I hope you'll ask questions if there are things that you'd like to know more about. I felt very lucky that early in my studies in museology, I chanced upon a preparator job at the Burke Museum, and preparator designer Gary Wingert taught me mount making. It worked with my woodworking background, and it led to being able to work at Seattle Art Museum with a crew of 5 other mount makers on building a brand new museum. It was an experience I'll never forget, and I got to learn from some incredibly creative people. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of different folks through these 30 years, and at this point, I'm very concerned about the loss of institutional knowledge, and it's one of the reasons I've decided to be teaching in addition to the little bit of mount making that I'm still doing. It's a wonderful craft, and I hope we'll see you in 2 years at the Getty. Thanks.
I really loved your Star Wars end title. That was amazing. Jamie, what a really cool shop. I'm sure we've got a lot of questions. I have some that I'm going to type in as well. As a reminder, we don't have the Q&A function for this meeting, so please keep putting all of your questions into the chat. And I'd like to introduce our Q&A facilitator, John George, who's going to help us get through all the questions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jamie. That was such a great tour. Jamie, the first question is, did you do the UW program?
Yes, I was part of the University of Washington museology program. Went through, I started in 1989 and finished in 94. And while I was there, I got a part-time preparator job at the Burke Museum and learned mount making. And they recommended me to Seattle Art Museum, and it kind of all took off from there.
Great. Actually, we've seen this question a couple times. Do you play the banjo?
Yes, I do play the banjo. There are a few hanging around.
Yeah. A lot of thank yous.
Yeah, from Laura, I've got the chat there. The blaster is a glass bead blaster because it doesn't produce the dust that a sand blast or using silica sand as a medium does. It's much safer. That runs through a whole cyclone and vacuum system to keep the dust contained.
Okay. With private shop, how do you deal with security for objects without giving too much away?
For the most part, I try not to have them here. I have done a lot of work with templating, but from there's a lot of, well, shall we say, obfuscation in the security. There are locked cabinets, but there are also pretty things hanging on the wall that are more likely to be taken, and I own those.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, that's it. What was the first torch you showed us again? I think you said it was your favorite.
Yeah, so the first torch is known as an easy torch or an orca torch. Otto Frei, F-R-E-I, the jewelry supply company, sells them. They're about $120 or so. And it just is a very nice size in the hand. It's got a good amount of heat for doing silver brazing of brass. And I only do silver brazing. I don't have any ability to do welding here. And that's especially because this is a very old wooden building with great big grooves in the floors that would catch sparks. And so the landlord has asked that there not be any welding.
Mm. Yeah. Can the blaster use both types of media?
Yes, in general, it's about the orifice size on the gun, and that's a changeable item. I don't know what the grade of the glass bead that I use is, but it's fairly fine. But a blast cabinet is really a pretty generic tool, and you can adjust it, and you can use a whole lot of different media. I could use walnut shell and things like that in there as well.
This one's a comment and then a question. I really appreciated your little ventilation system. It looks like a great option when you have to retrofit a shop. Can you talk about the fan system again?
Yeah, the fan system is really just dryer duct, the aluminum dryer ducting that is nice because it's self-supporting, so you can pull it out and position it right over the work. And mainly I'm going and trying to get a really good suction right at the point of the torch work. And then I have a window, and I've got a 6-inch hose that gets thrown out the window with then a block that it goes through, and the window just comes down on it. So it's an extremely simple system. I've actually had one of those that I would take on site and throw it outside a door or whatever. If I felt like it, I could probably actually put a hole through the wall here to permanently install it, but there's not much need.
Any chance the glass bleed blaster particles are recycled aggregate glass?
I have no idea. I just buy a bag of glass blasting medium. And so I really don't know that much more about it. I just know that it certainly made my life a lot easier from using wire brushes and sandpaper.
The small tabletop mounted bending device, what was that called?
So that is a duo mite bender, and they're made. It's like OGI products or something like that. They're out of Ohio, I believe, and it's locally made, or it's American made. It's a very nice little tool. It's got lots of attachments that go with it, and it just is a small tool that, I mean, a lot of times I'll just put it into a vise. I won't actually screw it to a table. And it just makes it so that you can really kind of aim your bending. You can also get an attachment so you can bend in the flat. So bend the hard way, I would refer to it. And just for the size of mounts that I mostly tend to do, which are, human size mounts, it's a really good thing for doing that level of fabrication. I mean, and even, 1/8-inch steel is really easy and things like that.
How do you get the contours on the epoxy? Any special tips?
The epoxy, really, I'm working to the contours of the object, and so the object gets wrapped in a very thin plastic. I find the plastic bags that use for trash can liners that are kind of clear, and it's a really tough plastic, but it's very thin, and so that is a good barrier layer. and I'll put a barrier layer over the epoxy as well. So there's usually a double barrier layer. And then I'm gently squishing it in. Now, if it's a fragile object, I won't just have a slab of epoxy. I'll make a lattice so that when the weight comes on, the epoxy has someplace to go, sort of as it squishes out. But it's the object that is giving the shape that we're wanting, and mostly from there, it's being careful about any undercuts that you could go and mold into.
Which model of the Duomite bender do you use?
I think it's the 5000. It's basically the most basic one. It's I've got just the standard kit.
Okay. What's a good source for a smooth jaw vise?
The vise that I showed that I referred to as a Versa vise or a parrot vise, Shop Fox makes their version of it currently, and they call it a parrot vise. And I believe that's a smooth jaw. Otherwise, a lot of machinist vices have actual jaw pads that are screwed on, and you could make a set of smooth ones if you wanted. It'd take some fabrication, but that might be a way to go.
What's the difference between a metal lathe and a milling machine?
So a metal lathe is for cutting things round. So the work is spinning and you're taking off the corners, or going, and you're making something that is radially symmetrical. On a milling machine, you've got a bit that's going this way, and you can cut away a surface, but it all depends on the bits that you use. The milling machine is for drilling, cutting slots, cutting shoulders, things like that. So, but it's basic machining, and you can get milling machines that are very small benchtop units, or you can get huge ones, and the same with lathes.
Thanks. Any more questions? No, there's nothing else in the chat. Laura?
I'm coming in.
Okay.
A few years ago, I saw another mount maker using the Duomite bender, and I put something onto the IMF's online forum, and Jamie answered and was like, yes, you should get this here's a thing, and you should get the attachment. Like, the attachments are really great. And it really has changed when I have to make a ton of mounts that are of the same bend over and over and over again. It has been a lifesaver. So thank you, Jamie.
You're very welcome. It's been great having you all here.
All right, so we can all head back over to the webinar. Oh, Larry Hutchings put a link in for the Duomite bender. It's a great tool. Get the attachments. Get all the attachments.
Yeah, get the upper level. Pay the money and get the upper level one. I mean, they're expensive because they're domestically made, but they are worth it. So, I just was speccing one for a friend, and I looked at the upper level one and went, oh, I wish I had that. I'm now seeing some of the extra things that they've included. So.
Yeah, it does a lot. And that, I think you said bending the wrong way, the brass strap, the hard way. Yes, it's gorgeous, right? And you don't even have to anneal. You just put that brass right in there, and it's just like, okie dokie. It took me a little while to figure out how to use it, but then once I had it, it was just playing around and making those bends, and you can make multiple bends and like S-shaped things. It's a dynamite tool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending Jamie's tour, and we'll see you all back in the webinar.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.